everyone. Today I am joined by Kent Combs, a Qi Gong teacher, Reiki practitioner, and integration guide based in Olympia, Washington, and online as well. Kent's work helps people slow down, reconnect with their body, move their energy, and come back to themselves through Qi Gong, Reiki, meditation, and integration support. He creates a space that is gentle, practical, and deeply human. What I appreciate about Kent's work is that it is not about forcing healing, not about fixing people or pretending life's always peaceful. It is about meeting people where they are, helping the nervous system settle, and giving the body a pathway back to clarity. Kent, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. So before we begin, I want to frame this conversation for our listener. Many people today are living in a state of chronic stress. Raise your hand in your backseat if that is happening, unless you're driving to listen to the podcast as well. And they're tired, scattered, disconnected from their body. And I experience this too. And often pushing through life instead of truly inhabiting it. And in medicine, we talk a lot about nervous system, inflammation, blood pressure, sleep, mood, hormones, and energy. But what we sometimes miss is the body needs safety before it can repair. The body needs rhythm, needs breath. The body needs movement that does not feel punishing. And that is why the awareness practices like Qi Gong, Tai Chi, meditation, Reiki, or other integrative tools can become very meaningful. They are not a replacement for medical care, but they may help people regulate, reconnect, and participate more fully in their own healing process. So today, we're going to talk about Kent's story, what drew him into Qi Gong and Reiki, how these practices support the body and mind, and how someone can begin even if they feel skeptical, stiff, tired, or overwhelmed. All right. So Kent, for people who are meeting you the first time, can you share who you are and what you offer? What do you do?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Evelyn. Yeah, thank you for asking, and I'm so happy to be here. So a little bit about me. I spent 15 years working as a chef mostly in Seattle, but I also worked in San Francisco and Baltimore, and I really enjoyed my career, but it was pretty darn stressful. And then it came to a grinding halt when the pandemic happened. I was the executive chef instructor of a small culinary team based out of Pike Place Market, teaching cooking classes. And it was my dream job. I remember, walking through Pike Place and, I'd go to my produce guy and hand select the produce for the classes. And then that all came to an end when the pandemic happened, and I was incredibly lost. I didn't really know what to do with myself, and I'd never taken any time off work. So that was when I moved from Seattle down here to Olympia. I'm so glad I did. And I moved here to start going to Evergreen, to the university here, just as something to do. And then as time went on, I discovered calling to try and help people. I think the pandemic helped open my eyes to how real all the challenges of daily life are for so many people, regardless of whether you're, and that's not just limited to the people who are working in the culinary industry. We all have stress. And so then as the years and months went on, my mom actually really encouraged me to begin practicing Qigong. And I put it off because I wasn't convinced, because it didn't look like you were actually doing anything. I wanted to do something. I wanted to break bricks and do cool stuff like that, not just move slowly and coordinate it with my breath. And then I found myself going through a really intense season of grief and mourning. And I was at a very low place. And it was the kind of depression where I could hardly get out of bed. And then, there's nothing quite like going through a devastating experience to open you up to different weird modalities that you might not have believed in earlier. And so that was when I started doing my Qigong practice. And I made a commitment to myself to practice for a half hour to an hour every day. And somewhere in the middle of the practice, not right away, but after a couple days, somewhere around the middle of each practice, I noticed that the depression, the grief, the pain that I'd been feeling was just gone.
Mm.
And I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to mentally process it or even really understand how this was working. I just
Mm.
had to wiggle my arms and breathe, and it worked. And so that got me really curious about it. And then after 8 months, I stopped needing to wear glasses, which was a
Mm.
pleasant and unexpected surprise. And then after a while, I just became so impressed with the practice of Qigong that I decided to dedicate my life to sharing it with the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate that you're sharing your personal deep story about grief, about depression, how you overcome. And the first person who gave you the hint was your mother about Qigong. So it sounds like there's connection that someone will lead you to the next path that we don't know about until we reflect that someone has mentioned it and now it's become into life and we have a chance to really interact with that. I'm curious, depression hasn't gone after like 8 months and stopped wearing glasses. It sounds very powerful for a person to experience, but for some of us who are still in a skeptical place about like Qigong, Reiki, what are those compared to yoga or someone else like hit workout, building muscle, especially nowadays world, how would you explain to them to like bend the mind and just give it a chance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, for starters, you don't really have to believe in the practice of Qigong for it to work, which is part of its beauty. For someone who is a skeptic, I would say, I would ask a few questions. I would ask, do you have stress in your life? Do you have sensations in your body that are uncomfortable and you would like alleviated? Has the traditional medical system let you down or given you the results that you want? Even if the more traditional Western medical system has provided you with solid care, and I'm not here to talk down about, regular medicine because it's a miracle and there's lots of benefits to it. I would say that if you're looking for a practice that can really meet you where you're at, chances are Qigong would be a good fit. One of the
Mm.
reasons why I adore the practice of Qigong so much is because it is so accessible. You don't
Mm.
need any special equipment. You don't need to get up and down from the ground like you do in a lot of yoga practices. The
Mm.
practice can be done seated, standing, walking. You can even do it while you're driving in your car or on an airplane. So, although there are more vigorous styles of Qigong, like Iron Shirt is one set that comes to mind, it's a very gentle practice. And so you don't have to do downward dog or
Mhm.
anything like that.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate the word accessibility because sometimes with the modern world of how busy life can be, and when you say that you can practice a qigong even in the car or on an airplane, then it feel like great. So people who will have jet lag, they would have like a tired time, they will have like food reaction on the airplane, and sometimes like the pressure and the height will make them feel anxious. Take a lot of Xanax to really calm down, and it doesn't really do a lot of work in the long term when they get this desensitization with the medicine. So it's a good tool extra to have. And I'm curious too is what is the difference between qigong, reiki, meditation, etc. There are many different terminology, but what is different in the practices that people can identify? And if they do one thing, doesn't mean they have to add on another practice of to make it full or complete to heal their nervous system.
Right. That's a great question. So let's start with the Reiki.
Mhm.
So Reiki is typically something that a practitioner is facilitating for you or on your behalf. So someone looking for a Reiki treatment or a Reiki session, they're going to find a practitioner who hopefully resonates with them and they feel safe working with, because we both know how important safety is, and feeling comfortable with your practitioner. And then that person would, at least in my own practice, what they would do is we would sit down and start a conversation. And we would discover, we talk about what the client's needs were and what they were looking for. I always like to start out every new session or every session with a new client by asking them what an outrageously successful outcome would be like for them. And then we go into the Reiki portion of the session where someone lays down. The facilitator, in this case me, would then begin to flow universal life force energy or Qi in Japanese, Qi in Chinese or Mandarin, and prana in the Vedic traditions. It's all the same energy. So we work on the subtle energetic body, which then ripples out into the physical manifestation. And we can work with emotions, different physical sensations, some say even beyond the confines of this birth and working through karma that we might have accrued through past lives.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's someone else kind of doing it for you. Even though you're collaborating with them and there might be a conversation going, it's more something that you go for a treatment, similar to like going to an acupuncturist or a massage. Now, where Qigong differs is that it's incredibly empowering because you are learning how to take healthcare into your own hands. So you don't need to book a session with someone. You're empowered to learn the practice, find ways that it works for you. Even it's amazing, and you can practice for just 3 to 5 minutes, and with consistency, feel some great results. So it's a much more empowering practice. There's oftentimes some, gentle flowing movements involved. And then meditation, I would say, oftentimes when people think of meditation, they're thinking of a seated meditation where you pick a focal point, maybe the breath or a certain part of the body. And then you allow your awareness to rest there. And that's usually so that people can find some calm and some clarity. Now, the thing about that focal point, though, is that those focal points, whether they're the breath or some element of the body, some sensation, those are in the present moment. Mind is oftentimes not in the present moment, at least if it's anything like my mind. But if you focus on something that is present, like the breath, then it helps to draw the nervous system and your awareness to the tranquility of this moment. And that is the magic. And so you can do that through your Qigong practice by focusing on the sensations of the movement. And as we integrate breath with movement, we skillfully use the practice to integrate our body of consciousness with our body of emotions and with our physical body. And as we get these currents circulating, then they tend to just naturally clear out blockages and result in better health.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. I truly appreciate that you really differentiate between the focal point. Because, of course, the mind keeps running like a matrix and the rat race in that keeps racing over again. I often have that problem. That's why sleeping is a little hard for a lot of women and a lot of us being busy too. And when the magic is you use a focal point of breath, of the heart rate, of the feeling, the pulse, and it's in the moment, it's happening. That's a beautiful idea. Yeah, and a beautiful concept for sure. Yeah, and the Reiki. Before you enter into your field of this, like from being a chef versus now becoming more holistic healer, was there any connection between those two fields at all? Do you miss your past life of doing your like chef life compared to like holistic healing now?
That's a good question. Honestly, I don't really miss it. No.
Great for anyone else out there are changing their career.
So I'm actually really glad that I did it this way instead of going the other way. I'm kind of glad that I got the stressful culinary career out of the way, so I wasn't always curious about that for the rest of my life. I'm very aware of what that's like. And my career nowadays is much more relaxing.
Thank you. And that speak to a lot of professional nowadays when they got to the point of being burnout. In medicine, burnout rate is pretty high, depression or even suicidal is pretty high. And for other profession as well, where this economic and the world feel like everything can be shattered, depending on what we see as a full cup of water or the half empty. And this example that someone have gone through life experiences and see the result, then that could really encouraging that there is not the end of the world and there are some other tools, aspects that we can take inside our responsibility to help ourselves instead of being hopeless. And I wonder, when you have a session with clients, how would they feel or expect after the first session, and how many other will follow?
And so we're talking about Reiki sessions here?
Either Reiki or Qi Gong or
Well,
any integrated session.
usually with so I offer private Qigong and Tai Chi and meditation lessons. I also offer individual Reiki sessions at varying lengths, and I'm really excited to begin offering Qigong plus Reiki sessions, which are a fantastic combination. So with those ones, we start out with movement, and we start out with some gentle Qigong to get the energy circulating. And then once we're nice and we feel at ease, then we go into the Reiki portion where it just, and doing some Qigong beforehand tends to result in more profound results from the Reiki portion of those sessions. Typically, people begin to notice some alterations and changes after about 3 to 5 sessions. Typically, it gains momentum as you continue to stick with the practice of Reiki. So there's a cumulative effect. So the first session might be more of a introduction. And I think it's very similar with people's health. Generally speaking, about 3 to 5 sessions, people start to notice a difference. And I would also like to say too, that just like every modality, Reiki doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work for you, then that's fine. And I will be more than happy to help connect you with a modality that does.
I know a lot of people who have a lot of mind racing when sitting down, meditating, being quiet is very difficult, where they have to move their body in a faster pace to focus. Based on some of the research, I want to quote a few other evidence that the research about Reiki is still developing and more mixed than the research around a movement-based practice like Qigong and Tai Chi. And some studies suggest that Reiki may support quality of life, relaxation, pain perception, or emotional comfort, especially in supportive care settings. But we should be careful not to overstate it. And what I appreciate here is a grounding framing, that Reiki is not being presented as a cure, it's being offered as a supportive practice that may help someone feel calmer, more settled, more connected to themselves. And I think that in the disconnected world that we live with technology, where it can advance our human psychology and our human behavior and performance a lot, the connection within ourselves and our soul is very deep core to go back to. And that distinction does matter. And integrative medicine, we do not need to choose between science and human experience. We can respect both while being honest about what we know and what we do not know, where each tools belong. So that is a core message that we can also provide for the clients as well.
There's types of Qigong that are very obvious. You know, if you're doing something like cloudy hands or, you know, it's very clear and can be, well, you can get some strange looks. Trust me, gotten some strange looks. But there is also much more inconspicuous styles of Qigong, sometimes called Neigong, because they're more internal. So, for example, you could just use the energy tends to follow the mind. So our thoughts have a profound effect on our meridian pathways. You could do a microcosmic orbit practice, but not actually move the physical body. Just move the energy with your mind. I'll explain how. So running up along the spine, there's one of the major meridians, the Du meridian, which is yang in nature. And then down the front center channel of the body, we have the Ren meridian, which is sometimes called the conception vessel, and it's yin in nature. And these two meridians, so the Ren meridian flows down the front of the body, and then along between the legs, and then transforms into the yang, into the Du meridian that flows up the back. So there's a flow that we can do, and I wonder if I can kind of demo this a little bit, but you're using your hands as you connect to the energy flowing up the back and then through the head and then down the front. So it's a very subtle movement, but still maybe you don't want to do this on the airplane. So instead, what you could do is you can just imagine a bundle of energy, maybe some soft golden rays of light like you see at the morning sun. You can imagine that at the base of the spine, and then use your awareness to draw that energy up along the spine and then down the front of the body. So this gives your body something to do, and you imagine the energy moving slowly enough that ideally you can sense or feel it as it is moving through the body. So that's kind of one example.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so imagine that movement, or we literally physically guiding that physical energy, because I know like in the past when I learned about polyvagal theory, then they help us doing the hands together and we feel warmer when we closer together, two hands, and kind of cooler outside because of the electromagnetic field that we have from our heart radiating out. That's a beautiful thing when we can really see it with the little glasses on our eye, and we can see how the energy moves in that perspective, but then it requires the feeling, that deep connection and intuition. And the more we practice, the more we can feel that warmness or cold when we disconnect as well. And I'm curious too, who have walked in your door most of the time that you help them with, like what condition that they usually come in for? What would these practices are best for what type of people?
Because from a Western lens, it sounds completely woo-woo and utterly ridiculous. And I would imagine that a lot of people listening or watching this are probably skeptical, and rightly so. Sure, it sounds all well and good to imagine some energy moving through me, but what good is that actually going to do? But we can evidence this through kinesiologic muscle testing. So if you want to follow along with me, it's something very simple. I'll invite you to just touch your ring finger and thumb, the tips of your ring finger and thumb together. And then you're going to take your first finger of your other hand. And if you apply a little pressure between your ring finger and your thumb, you just try and pull. So we're just establishing this is, okay, we've got a little connection here, right? So now what I'll invite you to do is we're going to think of something negative, maybe something that is a little dark or a little scary, or maybe a person you think is non-integrous, to say the least. Maybe a certain politician. I'm not going to name any names. But if you think of something that is maybe a little scary, and then try and pull your finger through this bond, and you might notice that it kind of pops right through. You don't have to squeeze super hard. Okay, so that's our test of the negative emotion, right? So now what you could do is you can think of something that is beautiful. Think of something that brings you joy. Maybe you can think of your cat purring while it sits on your lap, or think of your dog's wagging tail, or a loved one, or even just a beautiful song. So then once you get that, then bring that to mind, and then try and pull your finger through there. And you might notice the connection feels a lot stronger. Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That is your meridian system, your acupressure system, your life force, your energy responding to the positive frequencies or negative frequencies of your patterns of thought. And I think that this is a very little example, but I think it's pretty poignant to show that we're stronger when we're thinking about positive things, and the body is literally weaker or sabotaged when we're thinking about negative things.
Yeah. Thank you for showing us that example, and that give us tool to control our thought when things can be out of control sometimes. And a lot of time we can be in the mix of like, is it my thought or is it other people's thought influence that it become my thought, like internalizing things. And through these practices, we can just calm, slow down, and found the little fine line between the two connections. And I think it's truly critical to have that skill in this nowadays, so we can keep that boundary, love, joy to live in it, instead of being deep dive into that rabbit hole of like, what is going on? What did I do wrong from one thought to another?
right?
Yeah, thank you for sharing with that. And to go back to that question earlier, who
Hmm.
have you seen the most in your practice that get the good result or the people that you usually help with?
Yeah. Well, my practice has had different focuses over the years. So I began my Reiki practice, that was probably about 5 years ago now. And then I only started teaching Qigong probably about 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm,
So when I first began the Reiki practice, my focus was around body dysmorphia and
mm,
people's relationship to their body and oftentimes to food as well. So, working with clients who were experiencing eating disorders, body dysmorphia, gender dysphoria, and things like that. Then I switched my focus to be working with infertility and pregnancy
mm,
support. Had a lot of clients that were going through IVF treatments, which is an incredibly stressful, arduous process. And now I mostly focus on integration. And
mm,
so people come to me when they have big changes in their life. Maybe they've moved from somewhere else and they're feeling kind of displaced and not very settled. Or maybe they are going through a divorce and
mm,
they're trying to figure out what is life like now. Or maybe they're going through their own intense season of grief because they're mourning the loss of a loved one. Or I also work with clients who want some help with psychedelic integration support. I
mm,
gotta say, I do nothing around the actual psychedelic experience. They got to do that on their own time. But
mhm.
I can help them before to prepare for their journey and afterwards so that they can actually come and integrate the change. And it's a powerful combination to work with Qigong and Reiki because
Yeah.
oftentimes I find that one of the real benefits of the Reiki is that the talented practitioner will be able to help identify specific kinds of stuck energy, or maybe things
Mm,
that are resting in the subconscious that we're not aware of. And those subconscious beliefs or energetic attachments, they can have some real physical results. Thinking about this through a traditional Chinese medicine lens, we think of things as originating on the energetic level and then arising into the physical form. Whereas I
mm.
think through traditional Western lens, we usually think about it from the outside in, and I like to think of it from the inside out because I think that's a
Yeah.
lot more empowering because I'm the one who has to live in here.
True.
So oftentimes in the Reiki sessions, I will, consent is paramount. And so I don't take it upon myself to just go energetically
Mm,
pulling things out of people or removing them. What I would do instead is I might identify something somewhere in their body. Maybe it's some sort of an attachment. Maybe it's they're feeling let down by an event that happened. And then I can say, "Hey, feel this energy. I'm noticing this here in this part of your body." And then they go, "Oh, that's weird. I didn't tell you anything about my left foot. And why are you
mhm.
that's so crazy that you can feel some energy there." And I'll say, "Oh, well, yeah, it kind of feels like this. Would you like to let it go?" And then if they say, sure, or yes, or whatever, then we can work to release that. And so it can help you, working with a Reiki practitioner can help you to find energy that you might not be aware of, or maybe you have these recurring patterns that just come up again and again and again. And you're wondering, why is this happening? And
Yeah.
oftentimes it's because there's some part of us that is subconsciously inviting those
Oh,
scenarios to play out again and again. And so we
yeah.
work at the deepest energetic level to first off identify, right? The first thing you got to do is admit you got a problem. And then we
Honest
can work to
honesty.
release
Mhm.
it in a way that feels comfortable and gentle. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sound like the let it go or the recognizing there is the stuckness, the thing that we hold on to for a long time is a critical thing to also aware about it, acknowledge it, and do something about it. And I think the hard part at first is what is it that we are not aware about? And sometimes with these practices, you were able to identify them and people can put name onto something, like label something so they can have that form and then able to like work on it instead of like keep running around the circle, not knowing where exactly hitting. And they can just hit everywhere, travel every road to find out who they are, what identity that they are embodied that doesn't really help them. And the previous podcast I did with Shoshana, And she does the intuitive healing as well through a lot of changing thought concepts, which is a very beautiful thing too. Yeah, thought connect with the body.
Hmm.
And I wonder, the last question I have before open up to anything that you have to share that we haven't discussed about is, if someone listening today and feel disconnected from their body, overwhelmed by life, or unsure how to begin.
I would want them to hear that as lost as you might feel, as hopeless or distraught as you may be, there are people, good people in this world who want to work with you,
Mm.
who want to help you find and live the life that you want. And finding them can be challenging. If there's one thing that I want my clients to feel, it's sometimes that is not so easy to find or to cultivate. And oftentimes that's because our energy is not moving. You know, if you
Mm.
think about depression on a very simple level, depression involves some inert energy. And just like water, if water is stagnant, then it can become a petri dish for all kinds of pathogens and strange little creatures that might grow in there. And we don't really want that. So that's not so healthy, right? So if you can get your energy circulating, then good things tend to arise spontaneously and effortlessly on their
Mm.
own. And my story, or that's a big part of my story and my experience with this practice. I was down and out. I was immobilized by grief and mourning. And just by as we integrate breath with movement, as we integrate a little bit of mindfulness through conscious awareness of the experiences we're feeling, then this these currents of energy that flow through our body, through our meridians, they begin to circulate. And that can result in you feeling like you can finally take a deep breath for the first time in a long time. And if there's one other thing I'd like to share with people, it's that you are not alone in feeling stress. You're not alone in feeling however you're feeling. It's part of us. It's part of the human experience. And it can improve.
And for someone who experienced loss, who experienced being stuck somewhere, I hope that this message from Kent will touch them deeply, personally too. And from that personal experience, it will transpire into something else and have hope and faith. And I'm like, which one do you feel your body the best? Put your faith in it, complete the full course or whatever session, and then have a reflection. How do you feel in your body? Thank you.
So I'd say that the best place to find me is on my website, kentqigong.com. And that's where you can get all the news fit to print about all of the Qigong and the Reiki and everything else that I offer as well. Or they can also find me through my YouTube channel, which is at YouTube at Kent Qigong. Or also you can connect with me on Instagram. And my handle on Instagram is Kent Qigong Official.
Thank you so much, Ken. And Ken, thank you so much for joining me today. What I appreciate about this conversation is that you make these practices feel accessible. You do not have to be flexible. You don't have to be perfectly calm. You don't have to be understanding every theory behind energy, breath, or movement. You simply have to begin. Just start somewhere. And for the audience, I want you to hear this clearly. Your body is not just a machine to push harder. We've been there. A lot of us been there in the young year to pay the bill and to get things going, right? And your body is also a messenger. Sometimes fatigue, anxiety, tension, poor sleep, or feeling scattered is not a sign that you're broken. It may be a sign that your system is asking for rhythm, safety, breath, movement, and reconnection. And practices like Qi Gong, Reiki, meditation, and integration work are not replacement for the medical care, therapy, or proper evaluation when those are needed, but they can be a powerful supportive tools to help you come back into the relationship with yourself. So, thank you for listening. If this conversation helped you, share it with someone who has been stressed, disconnected, or carrying so much for so long. And as always, take one small step today toward feeling more present, more grounded, and more at home in your body. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And
Thank you
thank you,
so
Kent.
much.
Yeah.